But I would certainly be interested in the same stories, basically, that haunted me as a child, basically, which is Second World War. I would say we are talking about probably about Iraq. I mean, I think basically the situation there is extremely ambiguous, as we all know, which is very, let's say, parallel to what I have been telling. In fact, one of the scenes that you see in the movie, at the end of the movie, the latter part, when she gets into prison because they think she's a traitor, she's not, but basically, and we know she's not, but she's seen by the resistance as having collaborated with the Germans because she started an affair with a German officer on request of the resistance so that they would get certain information, but basically that all goes wrong. And so when the way she's treated in the prison, which is based on historical research that I found already in 1966, but I mean, it's clear that the situation is very parallel to Abu Ghraib, isn't it?
Yes. I noticed in the movie that sometimes you seem to be almost giving a social critique on modern warfare, the similarities to the waterboarding torture that was going on, and there's a similar scene in the movie. At what point in the filmmaking process does social critique come into the process?
When I see it into it, not when I start to think, how can I use elements of the now and put them in the past? It's more that basically they did that. The Germans did this. And basically when I read it, I realized that it had to do with the now also, isn't it? I mean when I was shooting it, at least, I think it was already, let's say, invented, let's say 10 years ago, that scene. But it was more that when like the scene in the prison, it was shot in let's say, in the end of 2005. Of course, all the photographs of Abu Ghraib had already been in the newspapers. And so basically I was quite aware that I was shooting something parallel to the now. But I would never try to, let's say, to take something out of the now and push it into the past. I think that's historical falsification. So I can only do that, and I do it when I see it, basically when I feel that the parallel is there anyhow. That is the same thing they did. Then I would pay perhaps a bit more attention or see it a little bit, basically look at it also with the eye that is basically formed, or my brain that is formed by the things that are happening around us nowadays. And that's clearly, you cannot escape that. But I would not basically invent it because of that. I think that's, as I said, that's false. So, but the waterboarding, basically, yeah, that they did that. And what happens in the prison, they did that. Yes, in fact, they talked. In that time, the Germans called the Dutch freedom fighters, or the Dutch guerrillas, or the Dutch resistance fighters, what they all were, isn't it? Freedom fighters, guerrillas, whatever. The Germans would call them terrorists.
Yes.
And sure, I'm aware of the fact that it is a strange and interesting to see for a modern audience, and illuminating perhaps in some way, that basically that the people that are the freedom fighters are called by the enemy the terrorist. Now you can reverse that, of course, in the now, isn't it? Then you can ask yourself the question, what are the people that we call terrorists? I mean, that would at least prevent us to see them as the devil always, and to see them completely as diabolical and satanic. At least it would open you up to the possibility that there's also a human being there.
You touch on that quite a bit in the film, that there isn't black and white in telling back tales of war, as typically Americans tend to think in very black and white terms.
Well, not anymore, I hope so. I mean, I think by now, I think a lot of Americans are seeing that they have been lied and cheated for about 5, 6, 7 years now, isn't it? I mean, that the government has been lying, has providing wrong information, knowing quite well that the information was not exact and accurate, and they have not hesitated to use it anyhow. They basically found a basis, so-called facts, that would provide them with a possibility to invade Iraq, that all have been proven to be falsified and not true. And so I think me talking about the ambiguity of war is quite well motivated. I mean, me talking about people that look good and turn out to be bad is quite motivated by the now. But the story was invented before the now. So it's more that when you work on a movie, that you see, of course, these parallels, and probably you push them a little bit, because you know it's parallel to the now. But as I said, you should not never do that by purpose. It should be there already. I mean, it should be in the past already. I didn't invent the idea that the Germans called the Dutch resistance fighters terrorists. They did. They called them terrorists.